Diluted like a potion in a vial, words recycled in a counterfeit trial. Echoes bounce but never leave the room. Plagiarized shadows weave their own doom. Similia, Similibus, the chance with flair. But the mirror cracks the caught unaware. Self-fulfilling whispers haunt the skies. The placebo of belief builds its lies. Drop the weight like tuning down the string. Deceit and doubt make the same bell ring. Cracked reflections screaming monotone. A symphony of fraud carved in stone. Similia, Similibus, the chance with flair. But the mirror cracks the caught unaware. Self-fulfilling whispers haunt the skies. The placebo of belief builds its lies. A bitter taste, a hollow cry. Oceans fail when the wells run dry. The doctrine falls as the curtain fades. Their borrowed truths meet the sharpened blades. Similia, Similibus, the chance with flair. But the mirror cracks the caught unaware. Self-fulfilling whispers haunt the skies. The placebo of belief builds its lies.
Abstract. This paper investigates the troubling trend of collective plagiarism, where a group collaborates on unoriginal work. It explores the link between this practice and the development of self-fulfilling prophecies around group identity. By examining how copying undermines individual and collective growth within a field, the paper sheds light on how expectations can become reality. The analysis delves into the concept of self-fulfilling prophecies, where initial assumptions about a group's capabilities, e.g., "we're not creative," morph into defining characteristics, potentially leading to a vicious cycle of unoriginality. Further, the paper explores the consequences of collective plagiarism, including the erosion of academic integrity and the stifling of creativity within the group. Finally, considering the free rider problem inherent in collective action, the paper proposes solutions to combat this issue, fostering a culture that values originality, critical synthesis, and individual accountability within collaborative work. Keywords: collective plagiarism, self-fulfilling prophecy, academic integrity, identity, creativity, free rider problem. Lay summary: in the global context, plagiarism and prior restraint intersect in complex ways. The ease of information sharing and dissemination through the internet has made it easier for individuals and entities to plagiarize content from around the world. This has led to calls for stronger international copyright laws and enforcement mechanisms to address the issue of global plagiarism. Prior restraint also has global implications, as governments in different countries have varying approaches to censorship and freedom of speech. While some countries have strong protections for free expression, others may impose strict controls on what can and cannot be published or disseminated. This can create challenges for individuals and organizations seeking to share information and ideas across borders. Collective plagiarism. Cons of Similia, Similibus, Curantur, and Homeopathic self-fulfilling prophecies. In the committee's view, homeopathy is a placebo treatment and the government should have a policy on prescribing placebos. The government is reluctant to address the appropriateness and ethics of prescribing placebos to patients, which usually relies on some degree of patient deception. Prescribing of placebos is not consistent with informed patient choice, which the government claims is very important as it means patients do not have all the information needed to make choice meaningful. A further issue is that the placebo effect is unreliable and unpredictable. House of Commons of the United Kingdom. From a linguistic analysis perspective, the term pathology inherently carries the connotation of disease. This is because pathology stems from the Greek words pathos meaning suffering or disease, and logos meaning study, so, by its very root meaning, pathology refers to the study of suffering or diseased states. There are, however, instances where the term pathology might be used in a context that appears to deviate from this definition. These cases often involve the identification of deviations from a normal standard, but not necessarily ones that cause harm. A report might describe pathological changes in a tissue sample, but these changes might not translate to any functional impairment or symptoms for the patient. Usage relies on a figurative extension of the meaning of pathology. Considered pathological because it deviates from the expected healthy state, even though it doesn't necessarily represent a true disease process. It's like saying a sentence is grammatically pathological because it breaks a rule, even if the intended meaning is still clear. Ethos theories delve into the concept of a speaker's character and how it influences persuasion. The idea is that an audience is more likely to be convinced by someone they perceive as credible, trustworthy, and knowledgeable. Imagine a doctor giving a presentation on a new medical treatment. Phronesis would involve the doctor demonstrating a deep understanding of the treatment, its potential benefits and risks, and how it compares to existing options. This goes beyond just knowledge. Arrate reflects the speaker's ethical character. In the doctor's example, arrate would involve honesty about the limitations of the treatment and transparency about any potential conflicts of interest. This speaks to the speaker's genuine concern for the audience. The doctor with Yonoa would tailor their presentation to the audience's level of understanding, answer questions thoughtfully, and show a clear desire to help people make informed decisions about their health. One of the foundational theories of ethos comes from Aristotle. Stability and change. Some studies suggest self-efficacy can be relatively stable, particularly for general self-efficacy. However, others have shown changes in self-efficacy over time, especially when looking at specific domains like academic self-efficacy. Self-plagiarism happens when you present your own previously used work as entirely new. This can involve recycling large chunks of writing, ideas, or even data from something you've submitted or published before, without properly acknowledging that it's your own past work. Although it might seem like you're simply reusing your own material, it's problematic because it misrepresents your effort and fails to demonstrate new contributions to the field. There can also be copyright issues depending on the context. Resubmitting an entire paper or heavily copying passages from your past work are clear examples of self-plagiarism. But it can also be trickier, like reusing data from a past project or salami slicing, which involves splitting a large research project into multiple publications without explaining the overlap. To avoid self-plagiarism, you can cite yourself whenever you use your own material. Treat your current work as an opportunity to build upon your past ideas, and focus on creating fresh content and analysis. The Coase theorem is an economic theory named after Ronald Coase, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1991 for his work on the subject. The theorem states that if property rights are well defined and transaction costs are zero, then bargaining between the parties affected by an externality will lead to an efficient outcome, regardless of how those rights are initially assigned. In other words, even if there are externalities, costs or benefits that are imposed on a third party by an economic transaction, the market can still achieve an efficient allocation of resources if the parties involved can bargain with each other without any cost. For example, imagine a factory that is located next to a residential neighborhood. The factory creates noise pollution, which is a negative externality for the residents. If the residents have the right to quiet enjoyment of their property, they could negotiate with the factory to reduce noise levels. The factory could either agree to reduce noise levels or pay the residents to tolerate the noise. Similia similibus curantur is a Latin phrase meaning like cures like. This idea is the foundation of homeopathy, a medical approach that believes a substance causing certain symptoms in a healthy person can actually cure those same symptoms in a sick person. Imagine cutting an onion and your eyes water and burn. In homeopathy, a highly diluted version of that same onion might be given to someone with watery, burning eyes because like cures like. However, traditional medicine generally doesn't accept homeopathy because there isn't strong scientific evidence to prove it works. Pseudoscience, on the other hand, is a claim, belief, or practice that is presented as scientific but does not adhere to the methods of science. Pseudoscience often relies on anecdotal evidence, personal experience, or speculation rather than rigorous testing and peer review. Pseudoscience can be harmful because it can lead people to make bad decisions about their health, finances, or other important aspects of their lives. The free rider problem is a situation where people enjoy the benefits of something but try to avoid paying their fair share of the cost. Imagine a public park. Everyone can use it for recreation, but maintaining it requires money. The free rider problem arises when people use the park without contributing to its upkeep through taxes or fees. This can be a challenge because some things, like clean air or public roads, are difficult to exclude people from using. Even if you benefit from them, there's no easy way to stop someone else from enjoying them too. This creates an incentive for people to act in their own self-interest and avoid paying, hoping others will foot the bill. The problem with everyone free riding is that the resource might not be provided at all. If no one pays to maintain the park, it will eventually fall into disrepair. Finding ways to ensure everyone contributes, like through taxes or user fees, is crucial for maintaining these shared resources. In an anarchist system, there's no central authority to say everyone chip in for the roads or let's all protect the clean water supply. This means people might be tempted to free ride, using these resources without contributing to their upkeep. Anarchy also relies heavily on voluntary cooperation. Deciding how to manage shared resources like water or forests, and ensuring everyone contributes their fair share, can be a complex task without a formal system in place. Anarchists might explore ways to encourage cooperation without a central authority, like relying on reputation or voluntary contributions. Governments, on the other hand, can focus on becoming more efficient, reducing corruption, and ensuring a fair tax system to get people back on board with contributing. Intellectual integrity is essentially honesty in the pursuit of knowledge. It's about valuing truth above personal biases and being committed to fair-minded thinking. They're also comfortable admitting mistakes and learning from them. Critical theory, while valuable for analyzing power imbalances, has its drawbacks. Critics argue it can be too focused on conflict, neglecting cooperation and social progress. Additionally, its reliance on interpretation and social values can lead to disagreements about what constitutes oppression. The complex language used can also make it difficult for many people to understand. Furthermore, some critics say it's better at identifying problems than suggesting solutions for social change. Finally, the emphasis on group identity can potentially be misused to silence differing viewpoints or create new forms of exclusion. Critical synthesis is a process that involves going beyond simply summarizing information from different sources. It's about analyzing, evaluating, and interpreting those sources to create a new understanding of a topic. You'll identify connections and contradictions between the sources, and you may even identify new questions or areas for further research. Tracking cultural exchange. Imagine a longitudinal study following a group of immigrants across continents. Researchers could analyze how their cultural practices evolve and interact with the dominant culture in their new home over time. This could reveal how cultural synthesis happens on a personal level. The term identity synthesis is central to Yiskah Mounk's book The Identity Trap, A Story of Ideas and Power in Our Time. In the book, Mounk argues that a new ideology has emerged in recent decades, which he terms identity synthesis. This ideology emphasizes the importance of group identities, such as race, ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation, in shaping people's sense of self and their place in society. Mounk argues that while this focus on identity can be a positive force in raising awareness of social injustice, it can also become a trap. When identity becomes the primary way people understand themselves, it can lead to a number of negative consequences. When people are primarily focused on their group identity, they may be less likely to see themselves as part of a broader community with shared values. This can make it more difficult to build social solidarity and cooperation. When people are divided into identity groups, they may be more likely to see members of other groups as rivals or threats. When certain identities are seen as more important than others, it can create a climate where people are afraid to express dissenting views for fear of being seen as offensive or insensitive. You can be exposed to many viewpoints and decide what you believe in. Indoctrination limits your exposure to ideas and discourages questioning established beliefs. You can choose how you live your life and pursue your goals. Indoctrination restricts choices and dictates how you should think and behave. You can analyze information and form your own opinions. However, the concept of freedom can be complex. For example, some argue that true freedom requires a basic level of education, and indoctrination can be a part of that education. Ultimately, the line between providing information and indoctrinating someone can be blurry. The Pygmalion effect, this theory, named after the Greek myth, suggests that high expectations from trainers lead to improved performance in trainees. Studies by Rosenthal and Jacobson have shown this effect to be real, with students performing better when teachers held higher expectations for them, even if those expectations weren't entirely based on prior ability. Self-defeating prophecy is a belief that something bad will happen, which then leads to behaviors that make that bad thing more likely to happen. For example, someone who believes they'll fail a test might not study, which actually increases their chances of failing. Procrastination is the act of delaying or postponing a task or set of tasks. People procrastinate for many reasons, including fear of failure, lack of motivation, or simply finding the task unpleasant. If someone tells themselves they'll never be good at something, they might procrastinate on tasks related to that thing. This procrastination reinforces their belief that they're not good at it, creating a self-defeating cycle. Placebo and nocebo effects are examples of how our minds can influence our health. Imagine a patient with a headache taking a sugar pill placebo believing it's a powerful medication. Their positive expectation of relief might trigger the body's natural painkillers, reducing their headache. Bias is a kind of mental shortcut. It's a tendency in our thinking that helps us make judgments quickly. Biases can be based on our experiences, our background, or even just the way our brains work. For example, we might have a confirmation bias, which means we tend to favor information that confirms what we already believe. Or we might have an availability bias, where we judge how likely something is to happen based on how easily we can think of examples of it. Logical fallacies, on the other hand, are errors in reasoning. They're flaws in the way we construct arguments. A logical fallacy might sound convincing at first, but if you take a closer look, you'll see that the reasoning doesn't hold up. For instance, an ad hominem fallacy attacks the person making an argument instead of the argument itself. Or a slippery slope fallacy suggests that one thing will inevitably lead to another, even though there's no real evidence to support that. Affinity bias, attribution bias, anchoring bias, sampling bias, selection bias, availability bias, recall bias, acquiescence bias, observer bias, funding bias. Bias isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can help us make quick decisions without having to overthink everything. But it can also lead us to make mistakes, especially if we're not aware of our biases. Logical fallacies are more deliberate than biases. Someone might use a fallacy intentionally to try to persuade you of something, even if it's not true. But they can also be unintentional mistakes. So, to sum it up, bias is a general slant in our thinking, while a logical fallacy is a specific error in reasoning. Both can cloud our judgment, but by being aware of them, we can become more adaptable thinkers and avoid being misled. Bounded rationality suggests humans have limited cognitive resources for processing information. We use mental shortcuts, heuristics, which can lead to biases, and these biases can influence how we interpret information and construct arguments, potentially leading to fallacies. Dual processing models propose two systems for thinking: a fast, intuitive system prone to biases, and a slower, deliberate system better at logical reasoning. Biases can influence the fast system's judgments, which can then be incorporated into arguments formed by the slower system, potentially leading to fallacies. Motivated reasoning suggests our desires and goals can influence how we process information. Biases can serve our motivations, leading us to favor information that confirms our beliefs and downplay information that contradicts them. This can contribute to fallacies in our arguments as we build them to support our desired conclusions. While these theories don't directly combine biases and fallacies, they highlight the link between how our brains process information biases and how we construct arguments fallacies. Understanding this link is crucial for resolution thinking and avoiding both biased reasoning and fallacious arguments. Bandwagon effect, Matthew effect, contrast effect, Horn's effect, framing effect, accelerator effect, bystander effect, Eliza effect, Barnum effect, Lombard effect. Anonymity and bias have a two-sided effect. On one hand, anonymity allows people to express themselves freely, especially on sensitive topics. This can be a positive force, giving voice to those who might otherwise be silenced due to fear of judgment. In online discussions, anonymity can also shift the focus to the ideas themselves, potentially reducing bias based on a person's background or social status. Shy or introverted individuals might also find anonymity a way to overcome social anxieties and participate in discussions they wouldn't normally. Anonymity can create echo chambers online, where people surround themselves with like-minded individuals, leading to confirmation bias and a distorted view of reality. The lack of accountability can also lead to a disinhibition effect, where people feel emboldened to express extreme or even offensive views, potentially creating negativity and hostility. Additionally, anonymity can be exploited to spread misinformation or propaganda through fake accounts, creating a false sense of consensus or amplifying certain viewpoints. K-anonymity is a way to protect individual privacy in datasets by making sure nobody sticks out. There are different pieces of information in the data, like age, zip code, or occupation. These are called attributes. Some attributes are like name and social security number, they directly identify a person. These are off-limits in K-anonymity. Other attributes might help recognize someone, but not for sure. Think of zip code or age range. These are called quasi-identifiers. K-anonymity focuses on these quasi-identifiers. It groups similar people together based on these attributes. The key part is the number K. The goal is to make sure every group has at least K people. To reach K, K-anonymity might replace exact ages with ranges, e.g. 20 to 30, or broaden zip codes to cover a larger area. With this technique, any single piece of information isn't enough to pinpoint a specific person. You'd only be able to identify someone as part of a group of at least K individuals. De-individuation theory. This theory suggests that anonymity removes social accountability. Without the fear of being recognized or judged, people may be more likely to engage in rude, aggressive, or even criminal behavior. Think of people acting out in a large crowd where they feel anonymous. This theory is associated with psychologist Philip Zimbardo's famous Stanford prison experiment. Imagine we all have a built-in social radar, constantly scanning our surroundings to pick up on what opinions are considered safe to express. The spiral of silence, a theory by Elizabeth Noel Newman, explains how our fear of isolation shapes how openly we share our views. We're naturally afraid of being ostracized. We subconsciously gauge what others think is okay to say. If we believe our opinion is uncommon, we're more likely to stay quiet to avoid being singled out. On the other hand, if we think our view is widely shared, we feel emboldened to speak up. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle. When people with a minority view stay silent, the perceived dominance of the majority view grows stronger. This discourages others holding the minority view from speaking up, further solidifying the silence. Think of it like a whirlpool. The more people who stay silent because of a perceived lack of support, the deeper the silence becomes for everyone with that view. Randomized controlled trials are experiments that involve randomly assigning participants to different groups. This randomization helps to ensure that the groups are equivalent at the beginning of the study, so that any differences in outcomes at the end of the study can be attributed to the intervention being studied. A double-blind study is a type of RCT in which neither the participants nor the researchers know who is in the experimental group and who is in the control group. This is done to reduce the risk of bias. For example, if the researchers knew which participants were receiving the new drug, they might be more likely to interpret the results in a positive light. By blinding both the participants and the researchers, double-blind studies help to ensure that the results are more objective and reliable. This comparison allows them to determine whether the intervention had a statistically significant effect. Identity and legal personhood. This theory dives into the distinction between natural persons, human beings, and legal persons, corporations, governments, etc. The concept of a legal person is sometimes seen as a strawman theory, where a legal identity is separate from the real person behind it. However, most legal systems consider a human being and their legal identity as one and the same, with rights and obligations flowing from that legal status. Law and the construction of identity. This theory explores the idea that law and legal institutions play a role in shaping who we are as legal subjects. Our identities are constantly being influenced by and informing the laws we live under. This creates a dynamic relationship where law both reflects and shapes our sense of self. Selfhood is like a constellation. Each point of light is a different aspect of you, like your talents, your history, or your quirks. The way these aspects connect and interact creates the unique picture of who you are. Self-reporting plagiarism can be unreliable. Students might be hesitant to admit to wrongdoing, even anonymously. This can skew research on how common plagiarism actually is. Studies have explored using anonymity-preserving techniques to get more accurate data. One approach involves item count techniques. Here, students answer questions about plagiarism behaviors without directly admitting to plagiarism itself. This allows researchers to get a better idea of the true prevalence. These studies track participants over time. While not as common in plagiarism research, they could be used to see if attitudes or behaviors towards plagiarism change over a student's academic career. There's limited research on the long-term effects of anonymity on plagiarism rates. However, studies suggest anonymity can lead to more honest reporting of plagiarism behaviors. Anonymity shows promise for getting more accurate data on plagiarism. Longitudinal studies could add another layer of understanding by following students over time. Censorship theory focuses on the deliberate suppression of information or ideas by a powerful entity, such as a government or media outlet. This can be done through outright bans, intimidation, or controlling access to information. Censorship aims to limit what people are exposed to and can discuss. Censorship can create the conditions for the spiral of silence. If certain views are censored or heavily criticized, people may be less likely to express them, even if they're not officially banned. This reinforces the perception that these views are unpopular and fuels the spiral. The spiral of silence can also be a tool for censorship. By creating a climate of fear and self-censorship, powerful entities can discourage dissent without resorting to overt censorship tactics. Research suggests the spiral of silence may be less relevant in the digital age, where anonymity can offer some protection from social sanctions. The harm principle, developed by John Stuart Mill, argues for a balance between freedom of expression and preventing harm to others. It essentially asks, when is it okay to limit what someone can say? Here's the key idea: censorship is only justified if speech directly causes or is very likely to cause harm to others. Offensive or upsetting speech wouldn't be censored under this principle. However, things get tricky when defining harm. Is it just physical harm, or can it include emotional or psychological harm? How likely does the harm need to be? These questions create challenges in applying the harm principle. There's also a balancing act: censorship shouldn't be more restrictive than necessary. Even if speech can cause harm, the censorship should be proportionate to the threat. A complete ban wouldn't be justified unless the harm is incredibly severe. Another concern is the chilling effect. Censorship can discourage people from expressing even non-harmful views for fear of being censored. Dead reckoning is a navigational technique used to estimate your current position based on a known starting point fix and factors like speed, direction, and elapsed time. Imagine you're on a hike and you know exactly where the trailhead is. Dead reckoning helps you figure out where you are on the trail at any given time without needing a map or GPS. Both dead reckoning and navigating censorship discussions rely heavily on a starting point, a set of assumptions. In dead reckoning, it's your known location. In censorship theory, it's the principle or value you base your arguments on. The harm principle, for example, is a common starting point for discussions on censorship. Just like errors accumulate in dead reckoning due to various factors, censorship discussions can also become skewed as they progress. Misinformation, emotional responses, and a lack of clear definitions can all lead the conversation astray from the initial principle. Legal extrapolation is like making an educated guess about how a court might rule on a new situation. It involves using existing legal principles and past court decisions to predict how a judge might decide a similar case that hasn't been tried before. Think of it like this: imagine a path carved by past court rulings. Legal extrapolation is taking that path and extending it a bit further, hoping it leads to the right outcome for a new and similar situation. However, this path isn't perfectly straight. Judges have some leeway in their decisions, and new facts in a case can change things considerably. So, while legal extrapolation can be helpful, it's not as certain as established law. This technique is used in many areas of law, like estimating damages in lawsuits or predicting how a government agency might interpret a new rule. The quality of the information used, the more relevant and complete the data on past cases and legal principles, the better the prediction. How similar the new situation is to past cases, the closer the new case is to ones already decided, the more reliable the guess about the outcome. How clear the legal principles are: if the laws involved are well defined, legal extrapolation becomes more accurate. While plagiarism itself isn't usually a crime in the legal world, it's a serious ethical issue. Lawyers have strict codes of conduct demanding honesty and integrity, and plagiarism breaks those codes. Disciplinary boards can punish plagiarizing lawyers harshly, potentially suspending or even disbarring them. For law students, plagiarism can be even worse, leading to failing grades or even expulsion, potentially ruining their legal careers. There are some legal situations where plagiarism can have legal consequences. Copying big chunks of copyrighted legal material like a legal scholar's article without permission could be copyright infringement. Additionally, if you have a contract requiring original work like a client agreement, plagiarism could be considered a breach of that contract. To avoid legal trouble and ethical issues, always cite your sources properly when using someone else's legal ideas or wording. Legal writing is about applying legal principles to your specific case, so focus on your own analysis and reasoning. Originality in copyright law is a complex concept with ongoing debate. The dominant theory in the United States, established by the Supreme Court case Feist v. Rural Telephone Service Co. 1991, requires a work to demonstrate a minimal degree of creativity to be copyrightable. Originality doesn't mean complete novelty, but rather the author's independent creation with some personal expression. This concept stands in contrast to the older sweat of the brow doctrine, which is now largely defunct. This theory focused on the effort and skill invested in creating a work. While some courts still consider effort, it's not the main focus. Mere compilation of facts, for instance, wouldn't qualify for copyright protection under this theory. A more nuanced approach is the theory of originality as modicum of creativity. This emphasizes the need for a modest amount of creativity in the work's selection, arrangement, or expression. It aligns with the minimal creativity threshold but acknowledges the role of creative choices within a work. Maltzman's theory of originality. This theory by Irving Maltzman suggests that originality is a behavior that is uncommon but relevant to a given situation. He distinguishes originality from creativity, where creativity refers to the impact or consequence of an original idea. The originality paradox. This concept highlights that while new ideas seem completely original, they are all influenced by our unique experiences and the vast amount of information we have been exposed to throughout our lives. So, even though ideas themselves aren't entirely original, the way we combine and use them can be. Some scholars propose using originality proxies to assess originality in practice. These proxies might involve considering the level of skill and judgment required to create the work, its variation from standard practices, or the presence of unique elements. This approach focuses on how to apply the originality standard in real-world scenarios. Several key points remain under debate. One is the degree of creativity required, particularly in areas like factual compilations or user interfaces. Courts grapple with how much creativity is enough for copyright protection. Another point of contention is originality in derivative works, such as adaptations or sequels. How much originality is required for works based on pre-existing material? Finally, there's the role of skill and labor. While sweat of the brow isn't the main factor, some argue that significant effort in creating a work should still be considered when assessing originality. Free riding occurs when someone benefits from a copyrighted work without paying for it, such as copying music or using images without permission. This discourages creators from investing time and effort in original work if they fear others will simply copy it without compensation. Copyright law attempts to strike a balance. It grants creators control and the ability to profit from their original work for a limited time, incentivizing them to create. However, copyright law also allows for fair use, permitting limited copying for purposes like criticism and education. Beyond copyright, creators can seek rewards through other means. Musicians might rely on touring and merchandise sales, while authors might benefit from book awards or public recognition. The concept of originality itself adds another layer of complexity. Copyright protects works with a minimal degree of creativity, not just entirely novel ideas. Courts sometimes struggle to define enough creativity, making the distinction between protectable and non-protectable works tricky. The commons-based peer production CBPP theory. This theory explores how resources can be effectively managed and developed as a common through collaboration and shared ownership. It emphasizes the role of communities in creating and sustaining valuable resources like open-source software, Wikipedia, and other collaborative projects. Social interdependence theory. This theory emphasizes the importance of positive interdependence, where individuals rely on each other's contributions to achieve a shared goal. Social development theory. Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. This theory highlights the importance of social interaction in learning and development. It proposes a zone of proximal development ZPD, the gap between what someone can do independently and what they can achieve with guidance from others. Collaboration allows individuals to learn from each other and push beyond their individual capabilities. Originality can even exist in derivative works based on pre-existing material. The key is whether the new work incorporates enough original elements, like a unique plot or character development in an adaptation. A strong transactive memory fosters originality by providing a rich pool of knowledge and perspectives to draw from. Groups experiencing groupthink often develop a sense of being right and unchallenged. This overconfidence can lead them to dismiss alternative solutions or potential problems, hindering creative exploration. When everyone is focused on maintaining group harmony, they may not actively seek out or consider diverse perspectives. Team members can know each other's expertise and experiences, they can build upon them, leading to more creative combinations and unexpected solutions. This theory suggests that collaboration creates a collective mind capable of generating entirely new ideas that go beyond individual contributions. By identifying key players and knowledge bottlenecks, can help create a more balanced information flow within the group. While the core concept of collective intelligence CI focuses on group problem solving and decision making, researchers are delving deeper into the underlying mechanisms and complexities. The wisdom of crowds, based on the work of Francis Galton, suggests that aggregating individual judgments even from uninformed individuals can lead to surprisingly accurate collective decisions. This emphasizes the power of averaging out biases and leveraging diverse knowledge within a large group. The term collective synergy doesn't appear to have a single, universally accepted definition. In simpler terms, Collective synergy happens when a group achieves more due to the positive interactions and complementary skills of its members. It's the magic that happens when a team works cohesively, leverages diverse perspectives, and sparks innovation that wouldn't be possible through individual efforts. High synergy, low dissonance is the ideal state where the group works cohesively, leverages to experience minimal conflict. Low synergy, high dissonance represents a dysfunctional group where communication clashes and the group is unable to achieve its full potential due to internal friction. Tragedy of the Anti-Commons describes a situation where a resource is underused because it has too many owners. Imagine a field with countless landowners, each with veto power over how the land is used. Even if everyone agrees the land would be best used for a public park, reaching an agreement to use it that way becomes impossible because of the sheer number of permissions needed. The result, the land remains unused, highlighting the inefficiency of excessive ownership fragmentation. Tyranny of small decisions refers to a situation where a series of seemingly insignificant individual decisions collectively lead to a negative outcome. For example, everyone might decide to take a slightly longer shower to save time in the morning. While each individual decision seems harmless, the cumulative effect can strain water resources. The key takeaway is that small, seemingly inconsequential choices can have a significant negative impact when they add up. The Logic of Collective Action is a seminal work in political science and economics, written by Mancur Olson and published in 1965. It challenges the idea that large groups will naturally come together to achieve common goals. Olson highlights the difference between benefits and costs. Benefits from collective action like cleaner air tend to be spread out diffuse among everyone. However, the costs of organizing and taking action like lobbying are often concentrated on a few individuals. This discourages people from taking initiative. Olson suggests that smaller groups are more likely to overcome the free rider problem. Everyone feels the impact more directly, and there's a greater chance of being caught free riding. Large groups, with diffuse benefits and costs, find it harder to organize effective collective action. It has been highly influential in understanding how groups function and why collective action can be difficult to achieve. It has applications in various fields, including labor unions, political participation, environmental movements, and the formation of interest groups. Dutch disease captures the surprising downside that can follow a resource discovery. Imagine a country strikes oil. There's a surge of foreign investment and money flowing into the oil sector. The influx of foreign currency can make the country's entire currency stronger. This might sound good at first, but it has unintended consequences. Just like a strong muscle can make other muscles weaker, a strong currency can make the country's exports more expensive globally. This hurts other industries, like manufacturing, which then struggle to compete. On top of that, the oil boom creates high-paying jobs, drawing workers away from other sectors. This can lead to labor shortages elsewhere. Imagine all the bakers leaving to work on the oil rigs, there might be a shortage of bread next. Finally, the government and businesses might become too focused on the easy money from oil, neglecting investments in other areas like education or infrastructure. Universalizability, this refers to the idea that a principle or concept can be applied universally, meaning it holds true for everyone regardless of specific circumstances or backgrounds. In moral philosophy, it's the concept of making judgments based on principles that could be applied fairly to everyone involved. Dutch disease highlights the potential pitfalls of relying too heavily on one resource. The initial boom can lead to a less diversified and potentially fragile economy in the long run. Educational inflation, also called credential inflation, describes a situation where the job market demands more education from applicants, even though the jobs themselves haven't become more complex. It's like a game of keep up. As more and more people get college degrees, employers raise the bar for what they consider qualified. This trend has a few consequences. First, it can make it harder for people from less fortunate backgrounds to compete for jobs, limiting their career options. Second, the pressure to get a degree can lead to students taking on heavy debt, which can burden them for years. Finally, this focus on degrees can create a skills gap. Employers might struggle to find workers with the specific skills they need, even if there's a pool of people with college degrees available. Universalizability. This refers to the idea that a principle or concept can be applied universally, meaning it holds true for everyone regardless of specific circumstances or backgrounds. In moral philosophy, it's the concept of making judgments based on principles that could be applied fairly to everyone involved. Dutch disease highlights the potential pitfalls of relying too heavily on one resource. The initial boom can lead to a less diversified and potentially fragile economy in the long run. Educational inflation, also called credential inflation, describes a situation where the job market demands more education from applicants, even though the jobs themselves haven't become more complex. It's like a game of keep up. As more and more people get college degrees, employers raise the bar for what they consider qualified. This trend has a few consequences. First, it can make it harder for people from less fortunate backgrounds to compete for jobs, limiting their career options. Second, the pressure to get a degree can lead to students taking on heavy debt, which can burden them for years. Finally, this focus on degrees can create a skills gap. Employers might struggle to find workers with the specific skills they need, even if there's a pool of people with college degrees available. Peer-to-peer lending, also known as marketplace lending, is a way for people to borrow and lend money directly from each other, bypassing traditional banks. It works like this: borrowers seeking a loan for personal needs or businesses can apply through online platforms. Investors with extra cash can choose to lend it to these borrowers, potentially earning a higher return than a savings account. The platform acts as a matchmaker, connecting borrowers and investors, handling transactions, and collecting fees. This can be beneficial for both sides. Borrowers with good credit may qualify for lower interest rates than traditional loans, and the process can be faster. Investors can potentially earn more on their money compared to a bank account and might have some control over who they lend to on certain platforms. However, there are risks involved. There's a chance borrowers might not repay their loans, which means investors could lose money. P2P platforms may also be less regulated than banks. Innovative data elicitation transcend traditional questionnaires and interviews. Consider incorporating wearable technology, ecological momentary assessment (EMA) for real-time experience reporting, or even performing discourse analysis on social media data to track alterations in behavior or sentiment. Multimodal data acquisition, combine disparate data collection methods. Track physiological modifications alongside psychological inventories, or analyze geospatial information in conjunction with social media activity. Intensified frequency, broader lens, augment data collection frequency. Instead of years between measurements, collect data in more frequent, shorter bursts to capture the nuances of linguistic change. Conversely, broaden the scope. Track multiple generations of a family or follow a speech community through a period of significant social or economic upheaval. Primary research, in essence, is the antithesis of secondary research. Whereas secondary research relies on pre-existing data and information, primary research involves the direct collection of original data. The researcher acts as the primary source, gathering information firsthand to address a specific research question or hypothesis. Primary research stands in contrast to secondary research. Imagine secondary research as sifting through existing knowledge, like combing a library for answers. Primary research, on the other hand, involves going directly to the source and collecting new information yourself. You become the investigator, gathering fresh data firsthand to answer your specific research question. This data isn't found in pre-written works, it's collected specifically for your project, tailored to address your unique needs. There's a lot of flexibility in how you gather this information. You could conduct interviews, design surveys, run experiments, or even make careful observations, all to get the raw, original data you need. Citation analysis is a technique researchers use to understand the influence and significance of scholarly works. It works by examining how often a particular piece of research, like an article or book, is referenced by other publications. Essentially, it tracks how much a work gets talked about within its field. By analyzing the frequency and patterns of these citations, researchers can gauge the impact of the original work. High citation counts often indicate that a piece of research is foundational or has significantly shaped the understanding of a particular topic. It also shows the influence of the author or publication on other researchers, revealing how their ideas are being built upon or challenged. However, it's important to remember that citation analysis isn't a perfect measure. High citation counts can sometimes reflect the popularity of a field rather than the quality of the research itself. Additionally, the field of study and the journal where the research is published can influence how often it's cited. External validity is basically the reach of a research study. It asks how far you can trust the findings to apply beyond the specific setting and people involved. External validity helps researchers understand those limits. The key idea is generalizability. How much can you trust these results to hold true for a broader population or situation? A big factor affecting this is the study's sample, the group of people involved. If the sample doesn't properly represent the real world, the findings might not be very relevant. Another thing to consider is the setting of the study. If it's very specific and controlled, it might not reflect the real-world conditions where you'd want to apply the results. In short, strong external validity means the research has a wider reach. Its findings can be more confidently applied in real-world situations, making the research more useful overall. Both water memory and the placebo effect hinge on the idea that perception can influence outcomes. Water memory, though scientifically unproven, suggests water retains a memory of substances it once held. Similarly, the placebo effect demonstrates how simply believing in a treatment can trigger positive responses in the body. Language plays a powerful role here. When we're told a treatment will work, it can shape our perception and influence our body's response in unexpected ways. This highlights the intricate connection between the mind and the body, and how language can act as a bridge between them. Hormesis, a concept from biology, offers another lens through which to view language. Hormesis describes how low doses of potentially harmful substances can be beneficial. This parallels the way certain unoriginal phrases or ideas, used sparingly, can spark creativity. Overused clichés, however, lose their impact. Both hormesis and unoriginal effects emphasize the importance of context. The same word or phrase can have a strong effect in one context, like a well-placed cliché in a nostalgic piece, but be ineffective or unoriginal in another, a cliché in a business presentation. Def is _plagiarism text 1, text 2. This function simulates a simplified plagiarism check by identifying a high degree of similarity between two strings. Note, this is a basic example and does not capture the full complexity of plagiarism detection. Args, text 1 str, the first text to compare. Text 2 str, the second text to compare. Returns, bool, true if the texts are highly similar, suggesting potential plagiarism. False otherwise. Lowercase both strings for case-insensitive comparison. Text 1 equals text 1 dot lower. Text 2 equals text 2 dot lower. Remove common punctuation marks. For punct in, text 1 equals text 1 dot replace punct. Text 2 equals text 2 dot replace punct. Split both strings into word lists. Words 1 equals text 1 dot split. Words 2 equals text 2 dot split. Calculate the intersection common words and union total unique words. Intersection equals set words 1 and set words 2. Union equals set words 1 set words 2. Check if the similarity is above a threshold, e.g. 70%. Similarity equals len intersection len union. Return similarity 0.7 adjust threshold as needed. Example usage. Text 1 equals the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Text 2 equals the fast brown dog leaps over the sleeping canine. If is underscore plagiarism text 1, text 2, print these texts are highly similar, suggesting potential plagiarism. Else, print these texts show some similarity, but not enough to suggest plagiarism. Memory heuristics are cognitive shortcuts or mental strategies employed to enhance memory recall. These techniques streamline the process of encoding, storing, and retrieving information. By simplifying complex data into manageable chunks or creating vivid mental associations, memory heuristics optimize the brain's capacity to remember. Heuristic plagiarism detection is a method for identifying potential plagiarism by using rules or guidelines to analyze text. Unlike exact matching, which looks for identical text, heuristics focus on finding patterns and similarities that suggest copying. This process involves cleaning the text, extracting key features like word sequences or frequencies, comparing these features to a reference database, and setting a similarity threshold to determine if plagiarism is likely. While efficient and able to detect various plagiarism types, heuristic methods can produce false positives or negatives and rely on the accuracy of the rules used. They are often used as a first step in plagiarism detection, followed by more precise but computationally intensive methods. Ecological memory of water bodies, for instance, a lake might retain traces of pollution or nutrient imbalances for years, affecting its biodiversity and water quality. This is a well-established scientific concept, unlike water memory. Prospect theory. This economic theory describes how people make decisions under uncertainty, often using heuristics to evaluate potential gains and losses. Fast and frugal heuristics. Gerd Gigerenzer is a prominent figure in this area. These heuristics emphasize efficiency and ecological rationality, arguing that simple heuristics often outperform complex models in real-world conditions. Neural correlates of heuristics, investigating the brain regions associated with different heuristics to understand their cognitive underpinnings. Agnosia is a neurological condition where the brain struggles to recognize familiar things despite having perfectly working senses. One of the most common types is visual agnosia. This means a person can see clearly but can't understand what they're seeing. For instance, they might not recognize a car, even though they can describe its shape and color. There are different kinds of visual agnosia. Apperceptive agnosia is when someone can't perceive an object as a whole, making it hard to draw or copy it. On the other hand, with associative agnosia, a person can copy an object but still doesn't know what it is. It's like having a picture without a label. Other types of agnosia involve senses like hearing auditory agnosia or touch tactile agnosia. These conditions can be incredibly challenging for individuals as they struggle to navigate the world around them. While agnosia is primarily a neurological condition, Its implications for language comprehension and semantic knowledge highlight the intricate relationship between the brain, language, and perception. Virchow's cellular pathology. This is a foundational theory, positing that diseases originate at the cellular level. It's the basis for modern pathology. Lacan's linguistic turn. Jacques Lacan, a psychoanalyst influenced by structuralist linguistics, argued that the unconscious is structured like a language. He introduced concepts like the mirror stage and the symbolic order to explain the development of the self through language. Fine motor skills and secure attachment. Developing strong fine motor skills is linked to cognitive development, and secure attachment has correlated with better outcomes. Mastering cursive requires significant fine motor control, suggesting secure attachment ABD cursive proficiency. Intergenerational transmission. Cursive writing was often taught in homes where parents valued it, potentially reflecting cultural and familial values. These values might be influenced by attachment styles, with secure attachments fostering a stronger transmission of cultural practices. Apoptosis and necrosis. These are programmed and accidental cell death, respectively, crucial to understanding tissue damage and repair. Non-excludability means it's nearly impossible to prevent anyone from using or benefiting from the good. For instance, once street lights are installed, everyone in the area can use them, regardless of whether they pay for them or not. Non-rivalry means that one person's use of the good doesn't reduce its availability to others. For example, listening to a radio broadcast doesn't prevent others from tuning in as well. These characteristics often lead to the free rider problem, where people benefit from a good without contributing to its cost. Because of this, public goods are typically provided by governments through taxation rather than private businesses. An orphan work is a copyrighted work where the copyright owner cannot be identified or located. This makes it impossible to obtain permission to use the work, creating a significant challenge for libraries, archives, researchers, and other potential users. Governments can introduce legislation that permits the use of orphan works under certain circumstances, with potential compensation mechanisms. Self-construction is the dynamic process through which individuals shape their identity. It's a journey influenced by personal experiences, social interactions, cultural backgrounds, and media. People actively select and integrate elements from their world to create a unique sense of self. This process is ongoing, reflecting the fluidity of identity. Authenticity is closely linked to self-construction. It's about being genuine, sincere, and true to one's inner self. When people align their inner world with their external expression, they foster a strong sense of authenticity. This authenticity is crucial for building a fulfilling and cohesive identity. However, achieving authenticity can be challenging. Societal pressures, fear of judgment, and self-doubt often hinder individuals from expressing their true selves. The constant influx of information in today's world can also contribute to identity confusion. To enhance authenticity, people can engage in self-reflection, practice mindfulness, set boundaries, and share their experiences with trusted others. These strategies help individuals clarify their values, reduce external influences, and foster self-acceptance. Traditional principal component analysis (PCA) is a powerful dimensionality reduction technique but is inherently linear. This means it's effective when data points are linearly separable or distributed in a linear fashion. However, real-world data often exhibits complex, nonlinear structures that PCA struggles to capture. Kernel methods offer a solution to this limitation by implicitly mapping data into a higher dimensional feature space where linear operations can be performed. This higher dimensional space is often called the kernel space. By operating in this space, we can effectively capture nonlinear relationships in the original data. Time series analysis, a specialized area within econometrics, focuses on data collected over time. It involves understanding patterns, trends, and dependencies between observations. Concepts such as stationarity, autocorrelation, unit roots, and co-integration are central to this field. Estimation theory, a cornerstone of econometrics, concerns itself with the qualities of different methods used to calculate parameters within economic models. It delves into concepts such as unbiasedness, consistency, efficiency, and robustness, assessing the reliability and precision of these estimates. Hypothesis testing, another critical component, involves formulating conjectures about economic relationships and evaluating their plausibility using data. Classical hypothesis testing, likelihood ratio tests, and Lagrange multiplier tests are examples of statistical procedures employed to make these determinations. Plagiarism benchmarks are essentially yardsticks used to measure how well plagiarism detection tools perform. These benchmarks are collections of text documents, some containing plagiarized content and others original. Research institutions create these benchmarks to objectively evaluate the capabilities of different plagiarism detection software. Commercial companies like Turnitin and Copyscape also use their own proprietary benchmarks to test their products. Additionally, open source tools often rely on publicly available data to create their benchmarks. By comparing the performance of various tools against these benchmarks, researchers and users can assess their effectiveness in identifying plagiarized content. Essentially, plagiarism benchmarks provide a standardized way to determine which plagiarism detection tool is best at spotting copied material. Detecting independent work involves a multifaceted approach. Initially, the writing style is scrutinized for consistency with the student's usual writing patterns. Simultaneously, plagiarism detection software compares the text to a vast database of sources to identify potential matches. However, these tools have limitations, as they may struggle to detect paraphrased or mosaic plagiarism. Human experts, such as teachers, play a crucial role in evaluating the work for originality, depth of understanding, and critical thinking. Proper citation of sources is also essential, as it demonstrates the student's ability to build upon existing knowledge. In some cases, providing supplementary materials like drafts or research notes can further corroborate the authenticity of the work. While technology aids in the process, human judgment remains indispensable for making accurate determinations about the originality of a piece. Conclusion. The ancients had only the books which they themselves wrote, but we have all their books and moreover all those which have been written from the beginning until our time. Hence we are like a dwarf perched on the shoulders of a giant. The former sees further than the giant, not because of his own stature, but because of the stature of his bearer. Similarly, we moderns see more than the ancients, because our writings, modest as they are added to their great works. William of Conch. Teleology is a philosophical concept that suggests events or actions are directed towards a particular end or purpose. When applied to the concept of freedom, the teleological view posits that history or human development is inherently moving towards a state of greater freedom. It's as if there's a built-in compass guiding us towards this ultimate goal. Critics argue that history is far more complex and unpredictable than a linear progression towards freedom. The teleological view can be seen as deterministic, suggesting that the outcome is predetermined, which can undermine the idea of free will. Some critics contend that the teleological view is often Eurocentric, ignoring the experiences of non-Western cultures. Conversely, a teleological view can be supported by identifying the progressive stages or mechanisms leading to the desired outcome. In essence, progression theory is about the how of expanding freedom, while the teleological view is about the why. While regression is excellent for numerical data, Quantifying originality is complex due to its subjective nature. How do you measure the newness of an idea? Is there a standardized scale for originality? These questions highlight the inherent difficulty in applying regression to this concept. If you have a dataset where creative outputs are assigned originality scores, e.g. by human experts, you might attempt to predict these scores based on various features, e.g. number of unique words, sentence structure, complexity, etc. However, this would still be challenging due to the subjective nature of originality. While not directly measuring originality, regression could be used to identify potential plagiarism by comparing text features, e.g. word frequency, and gram patterns to a database of existing works. However, this would be more accurately classified as plagiarism detection rather than originality regression. Human evaluation of content is the indispensable process of assessing content through human judgment. Humans excel at comprehending nuances, cultural references, and implicit meanings within content, elements often beyond the grasp of AI. Moreover, ethical dilemmas such as bias detection, misinformation identification, and harmful content mitigation necessitate human intervention. Human evaluators play a pivotal role in ensuring content aligns with target audience preferences, brand voice, and overall quality standards. Common human evaluation tasks encompass rating content quality based on criteria like relevance, accuracy, comprehensiveness, and engagement, identifying sentiment, fact-checking, content moderation, and A/B testing. Achieving consistency, scalability, bias mitigation, and effective evaluator training are key challenges in the field. Operant originality is an intriguing concept that seeks to bridge the gap between the structured world of behaviorism and the boundless realm of creativity. Behaviorism, particularly operant conditioning, traditionally focuses on shaping behavior through rewards and punishments. However, originality demands a departure from the ordinary, requiring a leap into the unknown. By applying operant conditioning principles to originality, we can potentially influence the creation of novel ideas and behaviors. This involves reinforcing behaviors that deviate from the norm, gradually shaping these behaviors into more complex and creative expressions, and creating environments that stimulate innovative thinking. While this approach offers promise, it also presents challenges. Defining and measuring originality is notoriously difficult, and the role of intrinsic motivation in creativity cannot be overlooked. Nevertheless, the potential applications of operant originality in fields like education, product development, and the arts are intriguing. Essentially, operant originality explores whether rewards and consequences can nurture the spark of creativity, transforming it from a fleeting inspiration into a tangible outcome. The lexicon employed to construct a message can profoundly influence its interpretation. This linguistic phenomenon, often termed framing, underscores how the rhetorical packaging of information shapes perception, memory, and subsequent action. For instance, the simple lexical choice of organic can imbue a product with connotations of health and purity, regardless of its intrinsic nutritional composition. This framing effect, extensively studied within psychology and economics, permeates domains from politics to advertising. Politicians strategically frame issues as gains or losses, while advertisers exploit loss aversion to drive consumption. Even in healthcare, the verbal construction of medical information can sway patient decisions. Consequently, an astute understanding of linguistic framing is essential for effective communication across various spheres. A tax is often perceived negatively, while a revenue enhancement can be more palatable. Underlying many frames are ideological assumptions. These implicit worldviews shape how issues are presented and understood. This just might be semantic conventional theory that refers to the widely accepted, established, or orientation explanations or models within a particular field. It's the bedrock upon which research and development often build. Hermeneutics constitutes a systematic and rigorous inquiry into the fundamental principles governing interpretation. As a discipline, it delves profoundly into the methodologies and frameworks employed in the elucidation of texts, symbols, and the complex tapestry of human experience. Originating as a cornerstone of biblical exegesis, hermeneutics has undergone a substantial evolution, expanding its purview to encompass a diverse array of intellectual domains. From the philosophical exploration of meaning and the legal interpretation of statutes to the literary analysis of texts and the sociological examination of cultural artifacts, hermeneutics has emerged as an indispensable methodological tool for unraveling the complexities and nuances inherent in human expression and understanding. Its significance extends far beyond the confines of its original domain, permeating contemporary intellectual discourse and informing a myriad of disciplinary approaches. Its significance extends beyond the realm of textual analysis, informing disciplines such as anthropology, psychology, and even artificial intelligence as they seek to understand the intricacies of human cognition and communication. Hermeneutics, therefore, emerges as a cornerstone of critical inquiry, and nothing more. The hermeneutic circle is a fundamental concept in hermeneutics, the field of study concerned with interpretation. It describes the cyclical process of understanding a text, artwork, or any kind of communication. We approach any interpretation with a set of existing beliefs, knowledge, and experiences. This pre-understanding shapes our initial interpretation. We begin by examining individual parts of the text, words, sentences, characters in art to gain a basic understanding. We then use our understanding of the whole text overall theme, plot in a story to revisit the individual parts and gain a deeper meaning. This back and forth movement between the parts and the whole leads us to revise our initial interpretation and develop a more nuanced understanding. It's important to note that the hermeneutic circle is not a vicious cycle where we keep going in circles without progress. Ideally, with each iteration, our understanding becomes more refined and complete. Sonorous charge, culminated syllabus. Citation references. Magnus, E.M. 1991. Originality and Plagiarism in Areopagitica and Iconoclasts. English Literary Renaissance, 21 87-101. Sadler, B.J. 2012. Nothing New Left to Say, Plagiarism, Originality, and the Discipline of Philosophy. Florida Philosophical Review, 12-1. Wittenberg, H. 2024. Turn It Off, Reflections on Technology, the Knowledge Commons and the Academic Plagiarism Industry. Scrutiny 2, 1-16. Abasi, A.R. 2008. Writing Under the Gaze, Plagiarism Policies and International ESL Students Patch Writing in Graduate School Doctoral Dissertation, University of Ottawa, Canada. Carlucci, M. J. Damont, E. B. N. Scolaro, L.A. 2011. Virus-Driven Evolution, A Probable Explanation for Similia Similibus Curantur Philosophy. Infection, Genetics, and Evolution, 11-5, 798-802. Greenland, J. 2024. Homeopathy and Biomedicine, Learning from Conflict Models. Weiss, S. Geck, B. and Wilhelm, O. 2024. How Much Retrieval Ability is in Originality, The Journal of Creative Behavior. Romney, A. Harrison, J. T. and Benson, S. 2024. Looking Back to Predict the Future, A Review of Empirical Support for the Self-Fulfilling Prophecy. Management Research Review, 47-245-260. Harding, L.M. 2018. Students of a feather flock together, a group assignment method for reducing free riding and improving group and individual learning outcomes. Journal of Marketing Education, 42, 117 to 127.
Truth diluted like a potion in a vial. Words recycled in a counterfeit trial. Echoes bounce but never leave the room. Plagiarized shadows weave their own doom. Similia, Similibus, they jam with flair. But the mirror cracks their caught unaware. Self-fulfilling whispers haunt the skies. The placebo of belief builds its lies. Drop the weight like tuning down the string. Deceit and doubt make the same bell ring. Cracks, reflections, scream in monotone. A symphony of fraud carved in stone. Similia, Similibus, they jam with flair. But the mirror cracks their caught unaware. Self-fulfilling whispers haunt the skies. The placebo of belief builds its lies. Drop the weight like tuning down the string. Deceit and doubt make the same bell ring. Cracks, reflections, scream in monotone. A symphony of fraud carved in stone. Similia, Similibus, they jam with flair. But the mirror cracks their caught unaware. Self-fulfilling whispers haunt the skies. The placebo of belief builds its lies. A bitter taste, a hollow cry. Potions fail when the wells run dry. The doctrine falls as the curtain fades. The borrowed truths meet the sharpened blades. Similia, Similibus, they jam with flair. But the mirror cracks their caught unaware. Self-fulfilling whispers haunt the skies. The placebo of belief builds its lies. A bitter taste, a hollowed cry. Potions fail when the wells run dry. The doctrine falls as the curtain fades. The borrowed truths meet the sharpened blades.